Cool. Good morning, good morning. We're here at Tower 1 West in the City of London, where we have two brave rebels who are currently scaling the building which is home to Marsh JLT Specialties. Marsh JLT Specialties, these are the insurer of HS2 subcontractors. We're here to demand that this essential, this integral part, this foundation in the supply chain of HS2, we demand that they withdraw and stop the insurance of HS2 subcontractors. Without this insurance, HS2 will be stopped in its tracks. HS2, as we know, they are responsible currently for the invasion, the destruction, the desecration of ancient woodlands along the route. There are 108 ancient woodlands in all that are on the HS2 route. These ancient woodlands, by definition, over 400 years old, are irreplaceable habitats. These are irreplaceable ecosystems. Ancient woodlands used to cover the whole of the UK, and currently we have just under 2% left in the UK, and HS2 is, as a single project, responsible for the majority of the destruction of ancient woodlands in the UK. HS2 is not going to be carbon neutral, it is not a green infrastructure project, and as such, this insurance company, Marsh JLT, is complicit in Ecocide, in the destruction of these irreplaceable ancient woodlands. It is complicit in the carbon emissions that we are seeing increasing, not decreasing, increasing since the 2015 Paris Agreement, where we committed as a nation to decrease our carbon emissions. HS2 is responsible for the desecration, destruction of 693 wildlife sites, 333 sites of special scientific interest. We're talking about sites where you cannot even walk your dog. We're talking about sites I've seen where humans are not allowed to go. And rightly so, they're protected, they're special, they're unique, lots of these sites. And yet HS2 have carte blanche to go into these areas and destroy them, raze them to the ground. At another location, we have rebels who are going to be occupying that building, another location that is owned by Marshall, again to demand that they withdraw their insurance from HS2 subcontractors. These guys are skilled climbers. These guys are skilled in not only climbing buildings, they're skilled in climbing trees as well. There's been lots of tree occupations, as we know, throughout the resistance that guys such as these, women such as these, thank you, officer. During the resistance that rebels have been putting up to HS2, we've had as many as 9 camps along the HS2 route where brave resistors to HS2 have been occupying tree houses of all manner, made themselves very much at home there. But today these guys, they've swapped the woodlands to central London. So we're here live at Tower Place, Tower 1 West, home to Marsh JLT Specialties, insurer of HS2 subcontractors. I don't know. So who's Alice, lad? Oh, Alice, I'll see her. We are outside the Marsh building, Marsh Insurance, one of the big insurers that are supporting the HS2 project. If you don't feel okay about this, then do something about it. Let Marsh Insurance know this is not okay. Are you a Londoner? Are you appalled at the fact that this is happening in your city? We talked before about blood money, about how all of these fingers and pies that we have here in London that are incredibly destructive to our environment, this environment that we absolutely rely on. So when you're watching this, please, please, please do something, get active. Let us know how you feel in the comments. Share this video with at least 5 people. We do not want to be operating simply within in an echo chamber. We want to hear what you have to say. So please pop any links that you can about HS2 on here so that we can get this message spread. If you're not familiar with HS2, it's a high-speed railway line that is currently going through countrysides in the UK, precious countrysides that quite simply cannot afford to be lost in a climate crisis space that we are in right now. We've got governments promising that they are doing something to try and prevent this devastation, and yet they are giving the green light for this project, which is absolutely appalling. Where are we now? We are right next to Tower Bridge in central London. So if you want to show your support, you're more than welcome to come down here and see these HS2 rebels up on top of this building trying to say, we know who you are, and this is not okay. We are not okay with this at all. Now, what you're looking at right now is both Extinction Rebellion, HS2 Rebellion. There's lots of people that oppose this. It's not simply XR. And you're watching these people trying to put in place a different type of infrastructure, an infrastructure of change, saying, come on now, we cannot be paying over £100 billion, £100 billion, that's over £7,000 per year per taxpayer. If you're a taxpayer watching this right now, is that not outrageous towards this devastating project? If you haven't been down the HS2 line, maybe we'll be able to show you some videos in a moment of some of that destruction and some of the beautiful landscapes where that destruction is happening. I'll also show you around where I am now, in a very much a concrete jungle, surrounded by isolated trees that have no bearing on the ancient woodlands that exist in these landscapes that are being cut down right now by HS2 and supported by businesses like this one, Marsh Insurance, where we are right now. So please, please, please get active, get chatting. There's a lot that you can do. Hi, you okay? Yeah? Is there anything that you wanted to say? You're a bit busy. That's very true. That's very true. But watch this space. We'll hopefully be able to talk to them a little bit later. As I mentioned, these are 2 rebels here trying to say enough is enough with HS2, stop the harm, and that includes what's happening in our countryside. We cannot be supporting fossil fuel investment in other countries. We cannot be supporting deforestation in any form, and that includes right here in central London. Now, I know that you're live streaming right now as well, Caroline, but I thought maybe I could actually interview you. Maybe that might be better. So if you just move your camera down, and then I can chat to you. So right here, I've got Caroline. Hi. Caroline's been heavily involved in the HS2, getting the word about HS2 out there, the resistance, really, isn't it?
The outreach.
Yeah. Absolutely. So Caroline, could you introduce yourself, please?
Yeah, I'm Caroline. I'm, as been said, I've been part of the HS2 resistance now for 2 years, and we have seen this project start from its very beginnings and escalate from the very time that HS2 first approached local people in the villages, the small communities along the length, and the cities, where the first inklings were that HS2 were delivering a letter to the door, hit the mat to say, do you know what, we're coming to possess your building, we're coming to possess your business, we're going to take possession of your home. This is what alerted me, first of all, to the, not just ecocide, but the kind of humanitarian injustice as well, that ordinary people, working people, were actually having their homes repossessed or possessed by HS2. And what HS2 would say is, we're coming and we're going to offer you 90% of the market rate, not even the full market rate. We'd like you to give us your home now. We'd like you to give us your business now. We'd like you to give us the land that's been in your family for generations, that you're going to bequeath to your family for generations. We're going to come and we'd like to give you 90%. How do you feel about that? And if anybody said no, not good enough, they say, well, just have a think about that, because we're going to go away, and if we have to come back later, do you know what? That offer might not even be on the table then. It might be far less. And this is what got me in the gut about HS2, because HS2 embodies everything that is wrong in the way that this system, this government of ours, uses people, uses nature as a commodity for insurance companies such as Marsh, companies, corporations such as HS2, and the major building contractors, major construction contractors, to create billionaires out of millionaires. We're nothing more than a commodity, and this could happen to any single one of us. So even if you're not on the route of HS2, why should you be behind this resistance? We should be behind this resistance because, as I say, it's the embodiment of everything that is wrong and corrupt with the system, and it affects us all. Every single taxpayer is going to be paying £7,700. The budget for HS2 stands at £106 billion, but Lord Berkeley, who was on the Oakerby panel, he withdrew from that panel. He withdrew from the Oakerby review because he knew that review into HS2, which gave them green signal for HS2 to go ahead, was nothing more than a sham. And his costings actually put this, wait for this, at £231.79 billion. That is eye-watering. That is eye-watering. I think I said before the other day that at the current budget, if you have £1 and you could pay £1 every second, every day, every week, every year, it would take you 4,000 years to repay HS2. That is the scale that we're talking about. And as an incremental scale, if you think of pounds as seconds, 1 million seconds is 12 days. 1 billion seconds is 33 years. So to imagine £108 billion, it's beyond. I mean, I think most people can probably imagine £1 million, £5 million, and what that might do, you know. But to imagine even £1 billion. And let's bear in mind that the original budget for HS2 was £37 billion, which already was far exceeded any other high-speed project in the whole of the world.
Now, I think we've spoken a lot about numbers now. So if anyone's like me and doesn't have a numbers mind, they might be a bit like, oh my goodness, this is a lot right now. This is a lot. Exactly. There's a few people that will really support HS2. What kind of arguments would they have, and what would you say to those arguments?
Well, the propaganda that HS2 regularly peddles is that HS2 is a green infrastructure project, and we know categorically that not to be the case. HS2's very own figures say that HS2 will never be carbon neutral in its lifespan. Even after 120 years, there'll still be 14,000 residual tonnes of carbon in our atmosphere. Now, the vast majority of that, of course, is coming from the construction, and the construction of the track will require vast quantities of concrete. We're talking about 14 million tonnes of concrete. This is enough to concrete the whole of Greater Manchester. So let's just take that for a moment. The whole, if you look at Greater Manchester on a map, it's pretty big. HS2 is producing enough concrete to pave the whole of Greater Manchester. So the carbon emission, I mean, concrete is the most carbon emitting man-made material, and HS2 demands in vast quantities concrete. So we know it's not a green infrastructure project simply because of the carbon emissions. But let's also look at the Ecocide. Let's also look at the wildlife crime and the Ecocide that's happening. You know, we should not be destroying habitat. We should not be destroying ancient woodland. We shouldn't be cutting down trees. And that's precisely what HS2 are doing. HS2 will say, well, we're planting 7 million trees. What they don't say is that some of those trees are actually hedgerow, They're not actually trees. And they say, well, we're only cutting down X hundred thousands of trees. HS2 don't classify a tree as we would classify a tree. They say a tree has to be more than 16 centimetres in diameter. So, you know, that they are really fudging the figures. And also what we have seen.
And also, I think just to add on to that, from an ecological perspective, when we talk about replanted trees, and even, for example, these trees here have absolutely no bearing on the ancient woodlands and the impact that has on biodiversity there.
You know, we see these plantations are packed in, and most of them wither and die. In some areas, 85% of the tree planting that HS2 have done has died. And the reason it's died is that in 2019 it wasn't being watered. HS2's excuse was that it was cheaper to replant the trees than to water them. So these trees are never even going to come to maturity. Now let's bear in mind that some of these ancient woodlands, they are home to really protected species, such as, for example, in the areas of Claydon and Calvert, where there's this major infrastructure project halfway along phase 1 between Euston and Birmingham. Halfway along that link is Calvert Infrastructure Maintenance Depot. In the woodland there is a protected and nationally significant colony of Bechstein's bat. Bechstein's bat demands a complex understory and a diversity of mature trees. You cannot create that. If you take that away, you cannot recreate it by a tree plantation somewhere else. It will take at least 40 to 50 years for any tree plantation to develop that level of maturity and complexity whereby it becomes a suitable alternative habitat for Bechstein's bat. And the Bat Conservation Trust back in 2017 said that HS2 is not going to protect the conservation status of Bechstein's bat. And that's just one particular type of bat. So, you know, it's nonsense to suppose that HS2 plantation scheme is going to replace the ancient woodland that it's destroying. It's just not going to happen.
Now, we live in a country that benefits from incredible ecologists, scientists, and people who can tell us why this sort of idea is such an appalling one, including David Attenborough, and I think, and Dr. Jane Goodall, and all of these really incredible names that we are aware of, that we're familiar with, and we've got people like Michaela Loach taking the government to court over these sorts of things. We've got whole communities being outraged by the walruses falling off the cliffs in the Living Planet documentary. This country, just like countries all the way around the world, are outraged by the loss of life, both human and also non-human animal, that is happening. So when I see and hear about things like HS2, it outrages me more, because I think, you know, we live in a conscious community. People in the UK love our wildlife. We love this country. There's so many amazing things to see. There's so many amazing places to visit. There's so many green spaces that are just gorgeous, and we're so lucky to have all that diversity. How do you feel knowing that we have such a community that thrives off of its wildlife and thrives off of knowing more about it, and yet we're experiencing this? Do you think that there's a lack of information being shared? What do you think the public would have to say about what's happening?
I think there's certainly lack of information being shared, and this is one problem that we faced, is that really the media have really backed off from disclosing much about HS2 at all. Now, HS2 is the biggest infrastructure project in the whole of Europe. If it was such a fantastic project, why aren't we hearing about it on the news and in the newspapers all the time? Well, there's a very clear answer to that. It's because the government know that if the general public knew a fraction of what's really true about HS2, they would be outraged. They would be outraged. And we have struggled to get the message out. You know, our media is also bound by what it can absolutely categorically prove because of libel law. And, you know, a lot of what is happening with HS2 as well is going on beyond harassment. HS2 are injuncting areas to prevent resistors, protesters from entering areas so that we cannot gain evidence of wildlife crime. and where we have.
And just for evidence of that, if you look online, you can see that there's been 9 instances, and those are just the instances that have managed to make it to reaching any sort of punishment. They've been warned 9 times for breaching wildlife laws or wildlife regulations. That involves everything from destroying nests to eradicating other sites where wildlife is clearly present, whether that's newts, bats, or other species, and they're not being held to account nearly as much as they should do for the human side of things as well, like you said. Where
absolutely not. I mean, this is happening on a daily basis. We all getting evidence of wildlife crime, a little bit. But I know it's happening on a daily basis because I get told by people that know. And a lot of this is stumbled on by accident. In 2019, just a local person walking in Calvert Jubilee Nature Reserve stumbled across HS2 workers who had gone into that nature reserve and were selectively lopping off limbs from trees with known batteries. By accident, that was stumbled upon. HS2 workers said at first, oh, we didn't know it's a nature reserve. Well, come on, there's whacking great signs on the gateways, And then they said, oh, well, we have permission. So they forged into whole lies. And as regards humanitarian injustice, we know that landowners and homeowners are pretty much gagged. They are when there are community engagements, when HS2 go into businesses to discuss their takeover, people are prevented from recording those meetings. They're prevented from, from disclosing what's happened during those meetings. So there's a big cover-up going on. People literally are being gagged. And, with HS2, they've got over 200 non-disclosure agreements with contractors, so that this kind of information is not getting out. And where we are getting the information out, HS2 are hell-bent on keeping it squashed. And a very good example of that was Sarah Green, who recently won a judgment in the High Court where HS2 refused to disclose their environmental assessments and their risk analysis on the aquifer at Harville Road. For years, Sarah's been trying to disclose that the foundations, the pile driving into the aquifer at Harville Road would undoubtedly cause pollution, leakage from a local landfill site about 100 metres away.
And if you're watching this and you're from London, that directly affects you. That water stream comes down to feed the mouths of people living in London.
That aquifer supplies the water to 22% of London, and it's clear, beautiful, filtered naturally, through chalk aquifer. This is beautiful, clear tap water, drinking water. And that's 22% of London will have their water supply jeopardised. HS2 own analysis showed that there was a significant risk of pollution. Not just a bit of a risk, a significant risk of pollution. And it's companies such as Marsh like this.
Thank you for bringing it back to here, because we're outside this building. Let's just explain why we're here.
Marsh JLT in the centre of London. We're here to demand that Marsh JLT withdraw their insurance from HS2 subcontractors, because without insurance companies such as Marshall insuring HS2, the project cannot go ahead. So this insurance company is complicit in those humanitarian injustices. It's complicit in the HS2 Ecocide.
You know what? You saying that I find quite exciting. Yes, there's a really depressing part of this, that a company that has people who live in the UK that no doubt would thrive in those green spaces that they are partially responsible for tearing down. Yes, there's a sad side to that, of course. There's a huge sad side to that. But it's kind of exciting to think that the solution could be as simple as a company like this one, as Marshall Insurance, just withdrawing their insurance and saying, no, you know what, we know that this is not okay. We don't want to support this. We want change as well. That's what we want. That's exciting to me, to think that the solution could be that simple. Amazing. Okay, we're just being told that the barriers are going to be moving, just so you know. Sorry, carry on. I'm talking to you as well, but I'm just letting people who might not be able to hear you know what's happening. Otherwise, they just think we're being a bit weird.
Sorry, madam.
Yeah.
We are going to move over there. Please keep filming, but we're going to move these back.
Okay, thank you very much for letting me know.
You going?
So as we mentioned, just over here behind us, we've got two rebels up in the glass building outside Marsh Insurance. This is an insurance company that is very much supporting the HS2 space. And what do you feel about that? Is that good? I don't know if that's good. I don't think that's good at all.
This is abhorrent.
This is abhorrent. In fact, that's a great word.
Isn't it typical? You know, do they care? What do they care about more? Do they care about carbon emissions? Do they care about Ecocide? Do they care about animals being killed on a daily basis? I've seen nests with chicks lying on the floor. I've seen badgers in the road. I've seen deer running into the road in the middle of the day as the chainsaws are advancing from one end of them clearing vegetation. They are literally being flushed out onto the roads in the other direction, fleeing their homes being destroyed. I've seen badgers and deers wandering around literally in the road in the middle of the day, wondering where the very heck their home has gone. It's just been chainsawed down. Does Marshall care about that, or do they care about the bottom line? Do they care about the black figures? This company is rinsing millions of pounds out of taxpayers, and in so doing, it's facilitating wildlife crime. It's facilitating the destruction of the homes that our wildlife depend upon. And I could break my heart. I have seen the evidence. You know, those Harris fences go up to protect the HS2 chainsaws. Where do badgers go if it's gone right across their trails? They have to go into the road. Every morning I've seen outside some of these badger colonies, dead badgers in the road, directly after those Harris fences, those Harris fencing panels that have gone up, and it's heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking. You know, we tried to keep this together. I'm not saying that you become desensitised, but if you gave in to that pain, and if you gave in to those tears, you wouldn't want to do it anymore. And I have, I have friends that live in these places. I'm quite lucky because I can go a few miles away and not have to face it when I open my curtains in the morning. But I have friends that look upon this devastation out of their curtains when they wake up in the morning, and they are suffering. Their hearts are breaking, and that they're trapped in their homes because where HS2 go, the house prices decline. In the village of Steeple Claydon, that overlooks the infrastructure maintenance depot, already house prices on average have declined by £30,000. People are trapped in their homes. They've got nowhere to go. They don't want to be living there anymore with this going on around them. You know, they used to be able to go out into the fields and walk. They used to be able to make use of public footpaths. They can't do that anymore because they're just too got on to drive through this horrendous, suffocating sore that's going to be created through our countryside. And you can't give into it. You can't give into it because it is literally heartbreaking.
Now, that it is heartbreaking. I absolutely agree with you. Like, what a joke! What a joke! We've been talking a lot about how the impacts in the UK are causing massive climate breakdown around the world, but we forget sometimes to talk about what's going on our doorstep, which is this and all sorts of other things. But this is one of the biggest outrages. I'm embarrassed to be British when I talk about HS2. I'm so proud of being part of the UK in some places. Like, there's some beautiful people here. There's people who love wildlife, who care for each other, who really want to see each other as individuals and as a nation thrive without having to be party to Ecocide. What can anybody do at home who's equally outraged as you and I, and these people who are very bravely scaling the side of a building outside an insurance company that's supporting HS2? What can we do from home or from London or from wherever you are across the UK to try and make change happen?
These people here are very, very special people. These people aren't nutcases. It's very easy to look at these people scaling the stone and think, what a pair of idiots. What the hell are they doing? These are brave people. These are people that, they see firsthand this devastation. So what I would suggest first and foremost is that people, if they live anywhere nearby, they go out and they try and look at the devastation that HS2 is causing, and you will be shocked to see If you are going around the M25 and you glance across towards Old Oak Common, you can see this vast soar, this vast destruction where the tunnelling is beginning. So the first thing I could suggest is that if you do live anywhere near the HS2 route, is to go out and have a look for yourself at the destruction that's being caused. Everyone can be contacting their MP. We have been handing out over this past 10, 12 days postcards to your MP where you can write one simple sentence to your MP as to why you're concerned about HS2, because on the 13th of September Parliament is going to be debating the legislation that protects HS2. Chris Packham put together a petition which was signed, has been signed by over 155,000 people, and in response to that, but only after some pressure, it's been agreed that Parliament is going to debate the legislation protecting HS2, and that's happening on the 13th of September. We need every single MP to be going to that debate and to be debating and listening to the truth, because there are some MPs that are dead against HS2 and refuse to toe the party line. Along the HS2 route, there isn't one constituency where MPs are not violently opposed to HS2 and representing their constituents. And I think that the government is beginning to realise and wake up to the fact that it is a bit of a vote winner. We saw this in the Chesham and Amersham by-election, which that constituency was created in 1976, and since then it's been a Tory stronghold. Very, very tragically, the MP there, Cheryl Gillen, she passed away earlier in this year, and there was a by-election. There was a 24,000 swing to the Lib Dems, and for the first time the Tories lost their foothold in the Chesham and Amersham by-election. So that is cynical, isn't it, to think that the carbon arguments, the business argument, the Ecocide argument, this isn't changing politicians' minds, but votes do. So show your MP that you're not going to vote for them if they are going to continue to get back behind HS2. That debate's happening on the 13th of September. So just one simple sentence, two simple sentences why you're opposed to HS2. Another way that people at home can be supporting the resistance is that there are still camps, and we have fundraisers that are fundraising for the camps, fundraising for the campaign, so that we can continue the resistance to HS2. So you can look for those fundraisers on HS2Rebellion.earth. That's the website, and on there you'll find links to the fundraisers and all the information about the camps. Get on board with even writing to your local newspapers. Get on board with going to maybe the stophs2.org website. I'll say that again, stophs2.org, and on there you'll find a plethora of information about HS2, way back when. So there's archives of all the newspaper articles, archives of the Transport Select Committee debates that you can look at. There's massive information there to get yourself informed. So get informed by visiting those websites, write to your MP, get them to Parliament by the 13th of September would be absolutely fantastic.
Now, there's one other thing I would add to that. On my way here to make sure I knew the latest information, I made sure that I listened to some podcasts about HS2. There's a lot out there. Some are rubbish, some are good. Unfortunately, I listened to one of the more rubbish ones. I listened to one with BBC Radio 4, in which they talked to 4 people who sounded like me, and they spoke to them purely and pretty much the whole thing was about the economic side of HS2 and the infrastructure and all of that sort of political baloney we get fed about HS2. Not at one point did they acknowledge the environmental consequences. Not at one point was the climate crisis mentioned. Not at one point was it mentioned that 5 species of animals will go extinct, or that people are being removed from their homes unwillingly. At no point did they mention any of that. So if you are watching this too, you can see a banner coming up now. It's all about trying to communicate why we're here, what we're doing, why is this important. Please communicate with the BBC or your local station or your local newspapers and say, hey, one, did you know this was happening? And two, why aren't we saying more about this from a perspective that goes beyond economic growth? We are not willing to sacrifice our environment for some pennies that aren't even guaranteed.
You know, it's very clear to me that HS2 very often get the final word in a newspaper article, in an item on the news, or on the radio. They always get the last word, and they regurgitate the same tired rhetoric that HS2 is a green infrastructure project. It's going to, draw, level up the north and the south, which we know just is not true. Complain. Go onto the website and complain to the BBC and say, why is it that HS2 are being allowed the right to reply in this way, and to allow that rhetoric to go out, that false narrative, lies, if to be blunt. Complain to the BBC. Let go, and actually, if you phone BBC rather than email, did you know that they account that for 5 emails? So phoning the BBC to complain is far more effective, because every phone call is worth 5 emails.
Amazing.
Top tip.
That's a really good top tip. Thank you so much, Caroline. Now, I think we should keep wandering around and see if we can speak to some people together. With 2 live streamers here, but there are a few people gathering, so let's see if we can speak to anybody else about what's going on, and see if we can get more attention on that. As you heard, that was Caroline there. Caroline has been heavily involved in a lot of the work with HS2. I've got a fireman here looking up at the building, looking a bit dubious. Oh, we've got some nice bee spaces here as well. We've got, obviously, people in this building care somewhat about the environment, to be encouraging bees. So I wonder whether or not it is possible, just by doing things like this, to get them to appeal to their wildlife-friendly side and recognise that putting out a few boxes pales in comparison to flattening forests in beautiful countrysides where there is abundance of wildlife that will be lost, and human investment in that is at no shortage as well. So by destroying these spaces, you're impacting a huge number of people and huge number of non-human animals as well. So we're going to keep walking around this space. There's a few of us here. Come and join us if you'd like to. We are right now outside the Marsh insurance space. This is a very key spot, because this is where HS2 is receiving its insurance. So if there is no insurance case for HS2, it could be that we have no HS2, the high-speed railway that's decimating British countrysides and is responsible for a whole lot of destruction. So let's really think about that. Let's put the pressure where we can. Contact your local media if you can. Tell them that this is happening, and let's get that conversation going, and let's get this stopped. As you can see, we've got some rebels now standing a bit further into outside of the building. There's a fuss being made from the people behind it. It's quite embarrassing, isn't it? This is a reputation harm to them. How embarrassing that you're supporting this. This is just awful. So you've got Marsh, INS, ditch HS2, stop insuring CO2. Absolutely, couldn't agree more. So the guy there saying you did a good job trying to get in. I believe the plan was to get some rebels inside. Get some rebels inside the building, because after all, we're not just trying to tell people outside the building that this is going on. We also want to tell the people inside. Are you aware that the company you work for is supporting this? 108 ancient woodlands. What? You can't replace an ancient woodland. It's madness. This is something that your company is helping to destroy. How does that make you feel as somebody who's living on this planet? If you're watching this, please tell me. If you support HS2, I would love to know. I'm yet to meet one single person that does. So if you are one of those people, please pop in the comments why that is the case, and let's find out if we can talk about this and resolve the situation amongst ourselves. Because honestly, environmentalists especially are at a loss. And I think anybody who knew about this would be at a loss as well. Now I can see if I can maybe try and talk to anybody who's from here. Oh yeah, how's it going? Would you talk to me on camera about what's happening? Unfortunately, not. Do you work for this company?
Yeah,
Oh, how do you feel about the fact that it's insuring HS2?
as far as I'm aware, they're not.
That you don't think that they are?
I don't know. I don't work in that.
Oh, I see, I see. So that sounds like passing the blame to me. But thank you very much for chatting to me. Now over here, as I said, we're just on the outside of the building. It might be some people enter the inside of it later. We don't know. I think that was the plan for this morning. And just over on the other side, you'll be able to see two protesters scaling the side of the building. So it's a very beautiful glass building, which works very well for holding up signs, because it means that you can get people to read them quite easily. And why are we here? Well, we're here outside, right next to London Bridge, trying to put a spotlight on the fact that companies within this building, an insurance company, is supporting HS2. Now we're going to try and see if we can speak to some people outside. Is there anyone out here that would be happy speaking on camera about why this is happening today or about HS2? Yeah, perfect, brilliant. I can see someone with the Stop H2, people with Stop HS2 signs. Would you mind introducing yourself for me?
I'm Madge. I've been involved in Stop HS2 for about a year and a bit, and I've been usually working around the Lichfield area, but up and down the line as well. And we're very adamant that HS2 should stop immediately today, because there is no need for it. It has no economic purpose. It's never going to make money. It's a huge vanity program. We don't need it. People aren't commuting the same way they used to. And apart from that, it's as environmentally destructive as it could possibly be. It's affecting aquifers for London. It's going to contaminate London's water supply at a time when water is going to become a critical resource. It's cutting down thousands of trees in ancient woodlands. We need all the trees we can get. We need to keep every tree growing where it is, and it's going to pour billions of tons of concrete, and we know that concrete is one of the largest emitters of CO2, even more than the entire transport network. Making concrete is creating carbon dioxide. It's ruining scores of priceless ancient woodland habitats and triple SIs and national nature reserves have already been destroyed. It needs to stop right away. There is no reason to have it anymore.
Thank you so much. I'm going to come and sit next to you because I think it will help me balance the camera a little bit, and also that means we can get some of the people climbing the building behind us, because they are still climbing the building very much in the distance. Also, let me just get behind you. So if you wouldn't mind turning around a bit so I can see you and see them in the background. Thank you so much. Okay, so we were just talking about some of the destruction of HS2. There'll be some people watching this, I hope not too many, because I'd like to think that more people know about this than those of us that are here, that aren't really familiar with HS2 or what that really means. Could you please explain to me how it was explained to you first and what your reaction was to that?
Well, when I first heard about HS2 about 10 years ago, I thought an electric railway, what a good idea, because it's going to replace internal flights. And then when I looked into it more deeply, I saw that it was really there to provide a high-speed shuttle to internal airports. It's going to take people even faster to airports like Leeds and Birmingham Airport. And so it's going to increase air travel. It's not really going to help the ordinary commuters because the fares are going to be incredibly high. In fact, it's going to damage the everyday person's commute because it's diverted billions of pounds away from the existing rail network, which is creaking at the seams with its Victorian infrastructure needing to be renewed and repaired. And I believe someone's done the maths that with the money that's going to be allocated to HS2, we could completely renovate the existing rail network, completely electrify.
Okay, you don't need to talk into that, I've got it.
The existing rail network, and what's more, provide free local bus services for everybody for 30 years, taking commuter cars off the road, which is really what we need to be doing, is reducing commuting. It's not going to create many jobs because it's going to be completely automated and driverless. And to add insult to injury, not only are existing trains going to have to run more slowly, increasing commute times for ordinary people, run more slowly because the existing network isn't having the money spent on it, but some trains are going to be ordered to run more slowly so as to not run faster than HS2. The Lichfield to London train is going to have to run more slowly so that HS2 can race it to London faster. which is
madness.
a complete madness, isn't it? It is a comedy programme, but there's nothing funny about it because it's creating more inequality. What it means is that taxpayers' money, and every tax-paying household in Britain is going to be paying the equivalent of £4,000 over the next decade to finance HS2. That money could be better spent on providing free bus services and a better infrastructure for walking and cycling. So it's complete madness.
Absolutely. Now, speaking of complete madness, there'll be a few people that are watching this that think this is complete madness, that there are people scaling a building in London to talk about this. This is a bit ridiculous. To what extent do you think this is proportionate to what's happening along the line of HS2?
I think this is a proportionate action to draw public attention to what's happening because so few people know about HS2. I've been engaging with members of the public in London for the last 10 days, and I've had so many people who've never even heard of HS2. It's an enormous expenditure of public money, and so few people understand what it is. So the public need to be made aware, and they need to start talking to their elected representatives and questioning why their money is being spent in such a ridiculous way.
Absolutely. And I mean, you are, I assume, a tax-paying citizen of the UK. How does it make you feel knowing that that this is your government that's making these sorts of decisions?
It's absurd because I've worked in education all my working life and schools are grossly underfunded. The children in Britain receive the worst school dinners, for instance, of any.
We're talking about HS2 though. Is that relevant to
Well, of course, it's an expenditure of public money. If you'd rather spend £4,000, would you rather it go on free buses and good school dinners for the nation's children, or on a train you'll never afford to use? The fare from London to Birmingham is going to be well over £200. It's not here for normal people. So it's a vast drainage of money from the public purse towards the already rich. We've got so much inequality in this country already. What we need to do is level up, not create more toys for the rich. It's a meaningless programme, apart from which it's a huge land grab. Thousands of acres of land are being appropriated by HS2, presumably for building, for more development, particularly in areas of outstanding natural beauty, where homes would never have otherwise been given permission to be built. And the loss of nature is appalling. It beggars belief that this is going ahead without public knowledge and consent.
It's outrageous, absolutely outrageous. Now, you talked about it being a transport link primarily developed for airport expansion and things like that. Today, one of the live streamers, Todd, is in fact a former pilot. So I believe we've been speaking to me for a bit too much time. I'm sure people are probably a bit bored of my voice, probably very interested by yours. So we'll come back to yours in a moment. But I'm going to pass the mic over now to Todd, who is going to speak more about the airport expansion linked to HS2. But before I do that, do you have anything else that you want to say?
If you've listened to this and you're concerned, please find out more about HS2 and how it affects you personally and how it affects the environment and the wider social structure of Britain, and make it known to your elected representatives. And if you don't get any satisfaction, then stop paying tax. Stop paying income tax. Stop paying council tax. The only way to hurt these people is in the pocket, I'm afraid, because they're totally motivated by personal gain. So just come out of the loop. Wake up to the fact that we're being ruled by idiots who are not concerned at all about your survival or the survival of life on Earth, and join XR.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much. Now you heard that there. Here, we're going to pass over to Todd now to talk more about the airport expansion element of HS2, something that is definitely not spoken about enough by any stretch of the imagination. If you're wondering where we are, though, just to recap, we're going to put a little bit of a map up now so you can see exactly where we are. But we are in central London. We are right next to Tower Bridge. And next to Tower Bridge, we are seeing rebels standing on top of a glass building that houses a insurance company called Marsh. And Marsh is the insurance company behind HS2. And without the support of companies like this, it is not possible for HS2 to continue. So please, in whatever pressure you can put on HS2, please do it. Do you know any HS2 supporters? Do you know anyone who works at Marsh? Do you know anyone who lives near this building and that might want to come and offer their support and outrage today? Please get them involved, add comments, share this video with 5 people. We're going to be learning a lot about HS2 today, and it's important we make sure as many people know about it as possible. So I'm going to pass over to Todd now, who's going to tell you more about the airport side of things.
Hello everyone, very good morning. As Alice has said, done a fantastic job of the commentary so far. Just to expand on the airport elements of the HS2 project. Essentially, Heathrow is obviously the biggest hub we have in the UK and one of the biggest hubs in Europe. So at the moment, what happens is you have regional airports across the UK that filter in regional traffic from around the UK and other countries, and with this HS2 link, this will clearly just improve on the connectivity to Heathrow. Currently, even though the UK government has got this Jet Zero proposal, they're ignoring the climate scientists, they're ignoring their own advisors at the CCC, the Committee of Climate Change, what they're doing is they're ignoring the fact that we need to reduce the size of the sector and degrow the sector completely. Instead, they are ploughing ahead and allowing business as usual and relying on unproven technology. There are no green alternatives to aviation, and with the 21 planned airport expansions, this extra so-called high-speed rail, which really just saves 20 minutes off of your journey time, is completely unnecessary in this climate ecological emergency. And like others have said, like when I first heard about HS2 and obviously not wanting to increase the flying myself, and understanding how damaging the industry is, I thought it would be a really great thing, and it took me a while to do my research on HS2 and fully understand what an ecocidal and destructive project it is. Obviously, the fact it will never be carbon neutral in its entire lifespan pretty much says it all for me. A lot of people don't realise that over 80% of the world's population have never stepped foot on an aircraft, and just 1% of the population globally create 50% of the demand. So, this rail service is just going to be another luxury form of transport which is not accessible to ordinary people. And if the government were really serious about their climate commitments, then clearly they would just ensure absolutely that existing rail infrastructure is as cheap as possible. The fact that you can get a flight down from Scotland to Heathrow in the first instance and it's cheaper than a train is purely because of the indirect subsidies that we provide to the aviation sector. The aviation fuel that we use, kerosene, is completely tax-free, and the government have even recently proposed that they're going to reduce airport duty tax as well. So we're doing the exact opposite of what needs to happen in this critical moment for humanity. Obviously, but the Heathrow expansion was supposed to be blocked, and unfortunately the appeal went through, and Boris said he would lie down in front of a bulldozer before he allowed that expansion to happen. But the reality is he's as usual giving us all the greenwash about the Jet Zero proposal, but only 4% of that proposal is going to be like so-called zero emissions flight, like electric aircraft. But even those electric aircraft, at 4% of his so-called Jet Zero proposal, is going to be powered by not entirely renewable energy. And even if it was entirely renewable energy, we don't have enough of it. We need to prioritise, sectors which are much more in need, the necessary sectors, rather than supporting, essentially a leisure travel service. In the UK, just 15% of the population creates 70% of the aviation emissions. So, it's not your regular ordinary person that saves up their hard-earned cash to go on that one holiday every year or two. There's these polluting elites which are completely destroying our planet And with as many initiatives that would help make the system more just. A frequent flyer tax levy has been proposed, which would essentially, even the government's own proposal would have completely undercut and undervalued the cost of these alternative fuels. And Shell Aviation have, conveniently coined these alternative fuels as sustainable aviation fuels. But I assure you, the vast majority of them they're not sustainable at all. They're made up of biofuels initially, and used cooking fats, which again are being used as biofuels in ground transport, which is much more efficient than burning in a jet engine. So, for me, it's just blindingly obvious that this HS2 project is merely just going to connect up the regional airports, improving capacity, supporting the third runway expansion at Heathrow, and completely ignoring the science. Even the UK Climate Assembly, had a semi sort of democratic process, if you like, although there was obviously lots of corruption and a framing around 2050. But the members of the UK Climate Assembly that came together, ordinary people, overwhelmingly voted in favour of frequent flyer tax levy, capping aviation growth. The International Energy Agency even say that long-haul growth needs to be capped, and domestic flying should be taken by rail. Now, clearly HS2, again, to the ordinary person without doing their research, would seem like a suitable alternative, but we already have existing rail infrastructure. We should be spending that money upgrading the existing rail infrastructure. We don't need to save 20 minutes. It's not going to benefit anyone in the long run. By the time this project's finished in the 2040s, vast parts of the planet will be uninhabitable. We could be facing multiple breadbasket failure. 1.2 billion climate refugees forecast by 2050. So, what more can I say? This is an absolute waste of taxpayers' money, as usual. The taxpayers, having to foot the bill for these ecocidal projects, which ultimately just line the pockets of our billionaire system. So, that's about all I have to say on the aviation link to HS2. So I'll pass on to whoever is next. Thank you for tuning in.
Right, okay, so thank you very much for that, Todd. Over here, we can see that the rebels are still up on the top of the glass building. They're talking to police right now. They've got a sign that they're trying to spread out, make it hard for that to remove. Is that that's the aim of what they're doing right now? If you're tuning in, you're thinking, what is this HS2 thing that you keep talking about? Well, it's a high-speed railway, High-Speed Railway 2. Being built in England but funded by taxpayers across the UK. The proposals were made public in 2010 and it's still going now. It was originally proposed to cost, I think, around 30 billion, maybe even less than that, and now it's about 106 billion pounds, the cost of HS2, this high-speed railway. But the cost, frankly, is obviously a concern for most of us. That means about £7,700 of taxpayer money are going towards this. I'm going to keep repeating that today, because if you're a taxpayer, I would imagine you'd find that just as outrageous as I do. But what I find also horrific is that ecosystems are permanently damaged and irreplaceable habitats are destroyed as a result of this appalling project. We've been talking about this, but now we're going to speak to somebody who's been very much involved on the front lines of campaigning against HS2. He's actually banned, I believe, from entering London as a result of some of his campaigning. He is an environmental scientist, and we're going to pass it over to you now. This is Larch.
Hello there. Yeah, lovely to be here. Thank you, everyone. So I spent a year and a half living on HS2 protection camps. I've been full-time with Extinction Rebellion since 2018, and during the lockdown, when we went a bit quieter with Extinction Rebellion, HS2 used that lockdown to try and rush through their destruction, their ecocide, and so it felt really necessary that some of us who were able to could go and live on those camps to try and slow that work down, to highlight the destruction, and really to help build a movement which accelerates the inevitable day when we end up cancelling HS2. HS2 has got no role in a future in this country. and it will get cancelled at some point. But it's just about how many of us step up and how committedly and how soon. That's going to shape when it gets stopped. So how many lives, how many homes, how many trees, how many woods are going to get destroyed by HS2, that depends on us, how soon we can step up and how many of us can do it.
Thank you, Larch, so much for talking to us about that. That was really fantastic. Thank you. And I'm sorry to hear that you can't be in London. I'm sure it would be amazing if you could be here. I remember when I last spoke to you, I have to say you're one of the people that really made me panic about this project and about the climate crisis more than anyone else, because you are so educated in this field. Would you be able to tell us exactly where your experience in this field is, so that everyone else can really take your words with the same solace that I did? And also, could you please explain as well, in fact, answer that first, and then I'll ask you the next question. Otherwise, it will get complicated.
Thank you. Thanks. Yeah, so I studied a PhD in geography. I was a lecturer and a postdoctoral researcher. I worked in academia for 25 years. I've lectured at Oxford University and many different universities over the last 25 years. I've written many reports. I've helped to create government policy. But it was very clear that the science required me to give up my job in 2018 to work full-time as a campaigner, because we haven't got time. We haven't got time for more reports to make a difference. What we need is pressure for change. And you've got the science of ecological collapse and climate collapse, which is accelerating, and then you've got the science of social change. And the science of social change says we have to do actions like this one today and build a movement or movements of movements like Extinction Rebellion, like HS2 Rebellion, that can bring the pressure for change. HS2 is accelerating the climate and ecological emergency. It's adding 14 million tons of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. HS2 and the government claim it's a green scheme, but it's not true. HS2 and the government have consistently manipulated the truth and lied. There are a number of select committees and government bodies that scrutinise Parliament have criticised HS2 for misleading Parliament. And in fact, on the 13th of September, there's another exercise where Lord Tony Berkeley, who's one of the world's experts on transport infrastructure, is pulling HS2 over the coals for misleading Parliament. It's an opportunity actually on the 13th of September, if we can get enough people to lobby their MPs to speak up in this debate and be part of this process, that we could actually get HS2 cancelled or at least seriously postponed at that point. So that's the 13th of September. That's a significant date that's coming up. But yeah, I've spent my life studying sustainability, the solutions to the climate and ecological emergency. And unfortunately, before we can implement those solutions in a meaningful way, we need political pressure. And that comes from civil disobedience and direct action.
Thanks for saying that, Larch. That's so true. And I have to say, all of these things happening, us standing outside this enormous glass building, trying to say to the insurers of HS2, stop it. It might give us a chance of getting our countryside back. Really fills me with hope. It makes me so happy to think that this could be a solution to something so enormous that it feels beyond you. But then I have Larch playing in my ear from about 6 months ago, just before Christmas time, where you were up in a tree in Euston trying to protect one of the so important and incredibly valuable, but also incredibly at-risk green spaces in London, outside this lady's house, who said she was so happy for you to be there. And I interviewed you there, and you said to me, the reason you were there is because we've got 3 months to act on what we know is true about the climate crisis. And that's why I'm in this tree, that's why I'm campaigning, this is why I'm here, because we need to make this happen now. We have no more time to fanny around, to put it my way. But then it makes me, I do wonder, with that Larch in my head, what's the point, to some degree, of these sorts of actions, of people getting arrested, of everyone saying enough is enough, if we have now, because that was so long ago, gone beyond that tipping point, that moment where we could make significant change. What would you say to that?
So that's a really good question, and this work involves a series of tensions, because on the one hand it's urgent, on the one hand it's too late, And yet every unit of carbon dioxide that we continue to emit will make a difference, will make it worse. So everything we can do to reduce that harm and stop it as soon as possible is worth doing. It's also, I think, vital that we kind of approach this work without an attachment to the outcomes. We have to do this because we're morally called to do it. To be alive in this tragic time in human history is to be in grappling with these difficult situations. If slavery was still happening in the way that it was in the past, it would be morally required of us to do something against it, even though for most of the slavery period we'd have been very powerless seemingly to do much about it. It's a similar thing here. We have to morally look at our conscience, look at the facts, look at the truth, allow the truth in, and then decide what we do on that. And it's a moral decision rather than one where we can go, okay, if I do X, I'll get Y result. We know very clearly, categorically, that every unit of CO2 makes a difference. So everything is still to fight for. In many ways, it is too late. We should have done this 50 years ago when the science was clear. We knew the solutions then, but we didn't. And every day since over those last 50 years, we should have done it, but we haven't. So the question is, what can we do today to bring about that change in the quickest, most sort of appropriate way possible? And that is organizing, telling the truth, letting it in. The more we let the truth in, the more we commit to making the required action.
Thank you for saying that. That filled me with a little bit more hope than I had a few moments ago. Lars, thank you. Now, a lot of people who can't see right now, because we're going between this live action, which is happening next to Tower Bridge, where we're standing outside of Marsh Insurance, which is one of the companies that are, well, it is the company that is helping support HS2 by helping them with their insurance. That will allow it to continue. So if you have any power today, whether that's coming and joining us, waving a banner saying you support these actions to try and prevent companies like Marsh doing what they're doing that supports so much destruction on our environment and also to the people affected across the line as well as the non-human animals. As well as doing that, we've also got Larch on the line here. Larch is not in London. You're not allowed to be in London by law. Larch has just explained his academic reasoning for being part of, academic and I suppose human reason for being part of this movement and trying to make action happen to prevent not only HS2 but climate catastrophe around the world. But for some of you listening, you might not know why he's not allowed in London. He's got a long history of campaigning with HS2 and in other Extinction Rebellion actions. I could explain these, but it's probably better if it comes from Larch's mouth himself, because who better to hear about this, to what extent people are willing to go to get projects like this to stop than Larch. So Larch, if you wouldn't mind just explaining to me why you're not in London right now, and how you feel about that, maybe in the landscape of today where a lot of people are watching people get arrested and they're a bit either conscious of getting involved or cautious of what actions will be coming.
Yeah, thank you. So as you said, I've taken a series of actions with Extinction Rebellion and then with HS2 Rebellion. I was in a 9-day tree eviction, which was the longest at that point tree eviction in UK history. I was then in the 27-day tunnel. I was in a tunnel for 27 days under Euston Square Gardens. The eviction carried on for 31 days. And then after that, on the day of the London elections and mayoral elections and the local elections around the country, myself and another rebel, we climbed on top of a HS2 office in London onto a roof. We sprayed the building pink and we cracked some windows in order to get a jury trial. But the main reason we did the action was to highlight the need for citizens' assemblies to address the infrastructure of this country. So we know that we cannot trust the government and HS2 to make decisions for us. Just to correct you, the figure you gave earlier, it's actually 230 billion and climbing is the best estimate of what HS2 is going to cost us, because that includes the rolling stock. It's no good building a horrific railway track like this and not having trains on it. You will also need rolling stock, and they have to be specific for this train. So The most accurate figure that comes from Lord Tony Berkeley, who's one of the world's experts on transport infrastructure. He was the deputy chairman of the review that looked into HS2. He is very clear. He's looked at more evidence than pretty much anyone else. And he's very clear that HS2 needs to get stopped as soon as possible. And he, in fact, has called a parliamentary inquiry into it, which is going to sit on the 13th of September. So just before I get on why I'm banned from London, which I'll talk about in a minute, the details of the action today. Marsh JLT Specialties is basically a merger of Marsh's, which is one of the world's biggest insurance companies, and then this JLT Specialties they specialize in special projects, construction projects. So that's a sort of section within Marsh now, this big massive company, and they are insuring all of the subcontractors of HS2. HS2 Limited is the company that's basically part of government. Our taxpayers' money sets it up. It reports to ministers. So it's this weird sort of situation where it's basically a bit of government, HS2 Limited, but it's also a private company. So it lacks the scrutiny and accountability that we really need in a democracy. But they then appoint thousands of contractors, subcontractors that do many of the different jobs, from delivering the toilet paper to, boring the tunnels under the ground to felling the trees, many thousands of different subcontractors. And Marshes insure them. Marshes insure those. So what we're saying to Marshes have got a Carbon Trust Standard award, and they claim they're one of the greenest companies, and they're, like all companies, they claim they're brilliant, don't they? And they're being untruthful in the way that they say, yeah, they're great. And they're then not only pushing HS2 and insuring, doing all the insurance work for HS2, they're also doing it for the Adani coal mine in Australia and many fossil fuel projects around the world. So this comes back to the immediate demand of this rebellion, this impossible rebellion, which is to stop funding fossil fuels. Our taxpayers' money through our government is being used to fund new fossil fuel projects, and that's outrageous. And our taxpayers' money, £230 billion of it, is being used to fund new CO2 emitting projects like HS2. 14 million tons of CO2. So that's why we're here at Marsh today, because they are a vital part of HS2, and they've got off the hook so far. This is where we get more sophisticated as a movement. We start to identify the supply chain, and as we move into targeting the supply chain, we can see a whole other range of options open up for being effective, for putting pressure for change. This is a major way we stopped fracking in the UK. We didn't just stop fracking by having protection camps. We also stopped it by targeting the supply chain companies. And when some of the suppliers like Eddie Stobbard, the road haulage company, when they had actions which hit their main contract with one of the supermarkets, that was costing them more than they were making out of fracking, so they pulled out. So we need to start doing this. Marsh is a massive global company. If we can hit them in the pocket and in their reputation, then they will pull out of HS2. So this is what we need, to put pressure on all of these suppliers, the thousands of companies in that supply chain. We've already had one supplier pull out. At the start of the Euston eviction, when we were down the tunnels, we also had people in the trees in this beautiful Euston Square Gardens, bit of greenery in London, which has now been destroyed by HS2. We had people in the trees, and they brought a cherry picker in to get people out, and City Lifting were doing that job, and they didn't realize how destructive HS2 is, how strong people care about stopping HS2. When they realized that, as they rolled up to the action, someone climbed on top of the cherry picker, they then reversed and got out of that job and ditched HS2. So we've already had the first supplier ditch HS2, and we need more to do that to build up momentum. So the reason I'm not allowed to be in London today is because, yeah, I did this action spraying HS2 offices pink. And for that, because I got a series of previous, much more minor cases, like I've got a few cases ongoing, that they then chose to put me on remand. So I was in Pentonville prison for 15 days for basically spraying a building pink, HS2 offices pink. The trial for that isn't going to be until August 2022. And in the meantime, so although I've now been released from remand from prison, I've been released on remand on bail conditions, and those bail conditions say that I'm not allowed it within the M25, that I have to be in this house by 10 o'clock at night, and I can't leave until 7 in the morning. I have to wear an electronic tag so that I'm electronically monitored for that curfew. I'm not allowed within 100 yards of any land, office or site owned by HS2. Those are the main kind of restrictions that I've got. I'm not allowed to sneeze unless it's on a Tuesday.
It sounds like it. Now, a lot of the things that you just said to me sound so complicated. It like really, you can understand to some degree how a massive project like this has been not ignored, but allowed to sort of continue despite its destruction, because it's a bit complicated to follow based off of what you were saying. Is there any way you could point people who are watching this, who are a bit confused, to learn more about it without being bombarded with stats and statistics and figures that they might not fully comprehend? Is there any simple way of understanding HS2?
Yes, you can definitely break it down. I mean, there's lots of information on the Stop HS2 website and on the HS2 Rebellion website. So I would definitely recommend going to those websites. I recommend following us, HS2 Rebellion, following us on social media. It's that, you know, with anything, when you're learning about new information, you just start reading into it a little bit and some things will sink in, and then you just keep exposing yourself to it and it becomes easier. But we can break HS2 down in a nutshell. I am a massive fan of railways. I've got 4 generations of railwaymen behind me. My great-great-grandfather, my great-grandfather, you know, etc., and down to my uncle who recently died while I was in Pentonville prison, actually. So I love trains, but this train is the wrong train at the wrong time, you know, in the wrong way, you know, because basically the basic law of physics: the faster you travel, the more energy you consume per mile. So, you know, basically a high-speed train consumes more energy than a more irregular train. And this is a vanity project. This was devised by 2 men in a room. Chris Steele, who was a high-speed rail lobbyist, lobbied Andrew Adonis, who was then the Minister for Transport. So basically, this is a classic case of what's wrong with our political system. It's all about the money and the access to influence that you get for paying money as lobbyists. So a lobbyist lobbied a minister. The minister had an ego trip, said, yeah, I want to be the minister that started the world's fastest train, because that was how Chris Steele sold it to him. He says, oh, you want the world's fastest train, don't you? And so everything about this scheme has been backcast from that conversation, which happened without any scrutiny behind closed doors. There's no minutes of that meeting, but we know that it took place. So basically, HS2 is a corrupt, expensive, destructive scheme that you know, because it's trying to be this vanity project. Now, in the process, like everything else about HS2, it's flawed and it's failed. It's not going to be the world's fastest train, but it's still going to be as destructive as if it was. So it's got a massive land take, massive carbon emissions, massive amounts of concrete and destruction. And the other thing then is to say, is because it's so corrupt and unaccountable, they basically just have this blanket destruction. They're a law unto themselves. So HS2, you know, make the rules up and they break the rules as they go along. And so our job as kind of protectors on these camps is to scrutinize what they're doing and show the public, trying to film it, share it, and try and bring more accountability to it. But what we have to do in a nutshell is just shine a light on HS2. The more people hear about HS2, the more they oppose it, and the sooner we'll bring forward the date when it gets cancelled.
I think that's a really valid. Now, I'm not going to talk to you for too much longer. I think we're going to move on in a moment. But I've got probably 2 more questions I'd like to ask you. Firstly, is about that communication side. So obviously, we were talking about how we need to get across the message that HS2 is not what we want. If you look up HS2 in the news, it's not nearly as damning as I feel it should be, and you probably feel it should be. How do we go about changing that and getting that communication strategy really nailed down so that we can get across the harm that's happening here?
The more people that join the movement, the better. The stronger our voices, the more we're united. So please, you know, join HS2 Rebellion. Follow us on social media. Do the same with Stop HS2 and all the campaigns. Come along to one of the camps if you can, if there are any camps near you. Today, we're encouraging people to use your voice wherever you are, and phone, email, and like use social media at Marsh's to put pressure on them to block their lines. So that's one action that everyone can take. Also, whenever you see it reported in the media, contact the media and put them straight. Ask for a right to reply, write letters to papers, So the constant, greenwash that we get in the media is that HS2 is green. Well, it's not. 14 million tons of carbon dioxide. That is not a green project. It will never be carbon neutral. Even the government's 2050 target, which is far too late, is broken by HS2. So HS2 has no role in a carbon climate emergency. So it also is a nature destruction. It's the most nature destruction of any UK scheme ever. It's the most destructive scheme in Europe. So, for example, they'll say about modal shift. When you change in the media, HS2 try and claim this, and the media foolishly report it irresponsibly. They report what HS2 say, which is not true. They claim in HS2 that there's a modal shift from road and planes to HS2 to trains. That's not true. Their own figures say there's a 1% shift from planes and a 3% shift from roads to HS2, which is negligible. But other research suggests actually HS2 is an airport shuttle service. It was designed in a time decades ago when businessmen traveled all the way around the world really quickly, and they wanted to get quickly between airports. That world is not with us anymore. We know that we cannot afford to live those kind of lifestyles. Traveling is happening less because of COVID. But HS2 would actually generate more flights and more emissions than if it didn't exist. So there will not be a modal shift. So if ever you see that reported in the papers, please correct them. 3% and 1% is the actual figures, and that's never reported in the media. And then the 14 million tons of carbon, it's not a green scheme.
It's outrageous, absolutely outrageous. That is so helpful. Thank you so much for talking to us, Larch, all the way from your home. I appreciate if you could be here, you absolutely would be here, and it would be lovely to have you. But at the moment, I appreciate that's just not possible. Thank you, Larch.
I'm dressed up like this because I'm about to go and do a crisis talk at Barclays Bank in Northampton. So.
Oh, amazing. There we go. So you're still definitely active, even if you can't be here talking about HS2. You can still do something. That's fantastic. Thank you so much. And I'm sure if anyone is listening from Northampton, maybe they can come and join you as well. Now, thank you very much, Larch. I'm going to move on now. Larch was talking to us there from his home, and he's about to go and do an action in Northampton, as we mentioned. And he's one of the reasons why he is not able to leave his home is in part because of some of the other things that he's been doing with Extinction Rebellion. One of those things has been underneath in the tunnels, where he was in the tunnels for quite a while, and he was not alone in that. And so in front of me here, I've got somebody who was in the tunnels with him, trying to put a stop to HS2. This is Roly. Hello, Roly. How you doing? I'm good. You're good? Okay, fantastic. I'm just going to get my headphone up so that I can use it as a microphone. You've done lots of interviews before, and I thought it would be really great to get your insight now into HS2, because we just learned about all the science about how a lot of things that are being said about it is utter rubbish. Yeah. But what has brought you? Why do you continue to campaign? I saw you yesterday was it yesterday or the day before, being arrested, picked up by police officers?
Yeah, it was quite a few days ago. I think it was about a week ago today.
Yeah. And why are you continuing to do things like this?
Yeah, I mean, HS2 is not only got like an awful detrimental impact on the environment and the ecology of this country. It's also like stretches like far beyond that. The social injustice involved in HS2 is incredible. It's on such a large scale. You know, they're tearing down working class homes. You've got minimum wage workers that are being paid to guard a railway line, while the people who actually own and are running HS2, they're billionaires. They're getting paid like a six-figure salary. You know, they're poisoning London's drinking water as well. The health of working class people and even middle class people is, you know, we're at this crossroads where it really is a life or death situation almost, and they're still fueling the climate emergency and the climate crisis. You know, all they do is lie. And they're also really violent as well against protesters. I know so many people who've had limbs broken by the workers and by the bailiffs that they send in. They don't care about the safety. It's not about connecting the north and south. It doesn't even go to the north of the country. It goes halfway up and it stops, you know. Everything they say is a lie.
Now, you are from the north, is that right, of England? So I think a lot of people, especially when they listen to somebody like me speak, who's clearly from the south, they often say, well, you're speaking from a point of privilege. You are very well connected in London. You don't have the privilege to speak on this subject. As somebody who is not from down here, would you concede to any argument for HS2? Because obviously there are reasons why they're doing it.
Yeah. I would say definitely not. I mean, HS2 only goes halfway up the country. It's not even the real north, as we would say. And it only gets people there 20 minutes quicker. I mean, and through COVID, we know that a lot of things have moved online. Not as many people need to come to London to do their work, and not as many people from London need to travel to, to Manchester and Birmingham and stuff. But even then, I'm from even further north than that. I'm from the northeast, and we have no connection to London at all, really. When we get on our trains to even get to the town of a city that's next to our road, we're packed in like sardines. We can't get on our trains, they're always cancelled, they're so underfunded, yet they're ploughing ahead with this railway project that's costing £230 billion when, to just invest in the existing railway lines, it could be so much cheaper and more efficient.
It's outrageous. It really is outrageous when you think about it that way. Really, the infrastructure needs to be directed in different ways, perhaps looking after local rail stations rather than creating a ferry system between airports is really what a lot of people said today. Now, you were in the tunnels underneath Euston, which I think surprised so many people that those happened. When that was revealed that there were people underneath the ground, I think everyone's jaws dropped. Why is these sorts of actions like that both being underneath in the tunnels underneath Euston, and also now looking at two people scaling a building, holding up signs saying Marsh Insurance ditch HS2. Marsh Insurance, if you're concerned and wondering what on earth is that, that's a company responsible for supporting the HS2 project by being its insurance provider, essentially. Could you explain why these sorts of actions, either standing on a building like behind you here, or being under a tunnel, is proportionate to what we're facing?
Yeah. So basically, resistance, it's all direct action, and direct action means that it costs the companies a lot of money, and it also gets a lot of media attention. And it sometimes, throughout history, it has made people rethink what they're doing, and it's made people change the path that they're going down. A lot of our rights were fought for through direct action, and a lot of causes have been won through direct action. We can't just, lay into bed with the people who are destroying not even our future, but they're already destroying the planet around us. There's already people dying in this crisis. It's not a matter of in the future, it's a matter of right now. And so many people are willing to go to any means necessary, because some things might be a little bit risky, but it's never ever going to be as risky as the climate crisis itself.
Yeah. And one thing I think that a lot of people will be surprised at looking at you, I totally agree with what you're saying. Fortunately, we have to tick the boxes of what people would expect to talk about when it comes to these sorts of spaces as well, just so that we can talk about the real important thing, which is the climate crisis. One of the ways that Exile got on a lot of people's radars was the talk of incooperative crusties, which is a delightful term that is obviously really nicely used. But you're obviously not. You do not fit that category. You're younger than me, I would say. What's got someone like you getting involved? I think you're kind of on. You're damned if you do, damned if you don't. If you're an incooperative crusty, that's one thing. But if you're young, people consider you unintelligent and often uninformed. But is that the case with you? I highly doubt it. But I will need you to answer that question.
Yeah. I mean, I became educated on the climate crisis quite a number of years ago, before Exile was even set up, before the climate movement was taken place again. And I was doing a lot of animal rights things, but it was purely out of just care for everything around us. I'm also a person of colour, and I faced a lot of racism growing up, and I learned a lot about colonialism as well. And through that, I learned about the environmental destruction, and I just felt like I owe it to my heritage, into where my family came from, that I I should do that, and I should stand for their land as well as mine.
Yeah, stand for marginalised people as well. Like it's a massive, massive issue. And what about HS2 itself? Is there anything that you find particularly shocking about HS2? You mentioned animal rights there. For me, I'm an animal lover. That's what's got me engaged with the climate, with HS2 specifically, is learning about the 5 species of animals that are likely to go extinct as a result of it, to learn about the 108 ancient woodlands, to learn about that side of things. When you take in the financial and the human aspect as well, it just becomes bigger and bigger until you really find yourself questioning, why on earth is this happening for any reasonable person? What for you was the thing that you would, if you could tell anyone about HS2, what's the shocking thing that got you standing here?
Yeah, I'd say the first thing, I said there was 3 main points, and it was definitely the 108 ancient woodlands, and that got me involved, you know, living on camps and things. But as soon as I realised that also the destruction it had on working class like welfare as well, that was when I got so invested that I was like, I can never leave this campaign now. I need to carry on, because I grew up in like one of the most working class areas in the country, and you know, working class homes are always sold off for industry, and this is just another example of that. They're going to come for working class homes with bulldozers and battering rams and not even pay people what their homes are worth. And then, I mean, the other point for me as well was London's drinking water. You're going to have millions of people whose drinking water is going to be poisoned just because HS2 are not willing to mitigate, and they're not willing to do things in an ethical way.
If you could say anything to anybody who's watching this, who wants to either find out more, wants to know how they can get involved, I know there's a big moment coming up on the 13th of September. Where would you point them? What would you say to people?
Yeah, definitely check out the websites. There's a couple of different ones. There's This Is Not About a Railway. There's the Stop HS2 website, HS2 Rebellion. There's so many social media pages as well. And also, even just the HS2 website, just read the HS2 website and see what you think about it for yourself, and then look at our pages as well and see how those match up, because we document everything that's really happening, and you can see the lies on their website and on ours. You know, you can match it up and see what they're saying is not true.
Now we can see, thank you very much. There's perfect timing just at the end of that. Thank you, Roly, to see some rebels being escorted away from the police. They're cheering, saying well done, thank you very much. They're cheering the people standing against the glass windows, against the walls of Marsh Insurance, the company helping HS2 to continue. Outraged by this, let us know, please let us know in the comments, share this video, talk to whoever you can about HS2. What is happening is absolutely outrageous. Now I'm going to pass over to Caroline now, who's one of the people who's been helping out much more on the front lines of the HS2 Rebellion now. She's going to be speaking to somebody as well. So over to Caroline.
Morning, hi, would you, I'm very well, thank you, how are you?
Very well, thanks. Very good.
To introduce yourself and just tell us what you have been doing this morning?
So, my name's Mick.
Hi, Mick.
And we have been outside the Marsh building today, Marsh offices, protesting about the insurance company that's backing HS2 and coal mine extraction. So we complained to them today. We actually managed to complain to one of their senior staff about what they're doing and about what that means for the climate, and he is going to bring that to the board, bring that to his superiors as something that they need to be concerned about.
So you actually got a positive response then in your complaint. He is pledged to bring this to board direct.
That's what he said. I mean, you can't be 100% whether he's going to do that, but what we do know is that he wasn't just, he was somebody who had the man we spoke to had some position in the company that and we know that because he seemed very knowledgeable about the company. He seemed very knowledgeable about their green policies.
Oh, interesting. So they have green policies.
They have green policies. They, you know, like all companies, they have, you know, a nice green exterior that looks sort of very nice. And what we pointed out is that although there might be good, they might be doing stuff, you know, they might be ensuring, which is a claim he made, that he's also ensuring wind farms. But what we pointed out to him today is that there is a huge hypocrisy in his company, in that he's funding or facilitating big projects and harmful coal mines. And he basically had explained to me that he has children, and this is something, the green issue is something he's really concerned about. And he wants to really drive a green issue in this company. And I feel I managed to really connect with him on a human to human level. You know, I explained to him that, you know, the ground that we're standing on today, and it's not the ground I stand on, it's the ground that we both stand on, is actually actually in question, and we need to follow the science. The science is clear. We all need to do something very drastic to avert a climate catastrophe. And I think he went away with that today, and he agrees with everything about that.
Do you feel that he was actually surprised by what you brought to his attention about HS2? Did you feel that genuinely was a surprise to him, or do you think maybe that he was just kind of giving you some kind of spiel? How do you genuinely do you feel his response to you was?
Well, it was a bit rubbish in the sense that he said he doesn't know about HS2. And you know, he sort of pointed out all the good stuff he's done, and I sort of explained to him, look, I'm you know, I'm aware things are not black and white. You know, companies do all sorts of things. It doesn't mean to say they're all bad and they're all harmful. But I did explain to him that, you know, as a person who is really concerned about the climate, that not knowing about the HS2 wouldn't be consistent with his own beliefs. And actually, he agreed with me and said, you know, basically he said, I must check out this claim that you're making, and so on and so forth. So he's not admitting, but you know, the fact that I brought this to his attention, the fact that, you know, he does care about this stuff, and we talked about, you know, the children, you know, the next generation, and he actually has children, and I explained to him that, you know, I'm here today because one of the reasons why I justify my actions is because of the next generation. I feel for them. You know, they are going to inherit a catastrophe, and why should they? They haven't had any part in that catastrophe. And I think I think we connected on that level. So I'm, you know, I didn't make like a change here today, but I made a connection with a man today in this office, in this company, that I hope hopefully might make a difference.
Well, from small acorns, mighty oak trees grow.
Exactly.
You dropped that, you planted that seed, planted that acorn in that man's mind. You say maybe you have made a difference today. It's potentially you've made enough difference today to this campaign.
I hope
be
so.
Able to communicate in a peaceful manner with the gentleman that's in there. Himself, he's got children. He claims not to be aware of the heinous nature of HS2. I don't use that word lightly. he's going to go away into that now,
Exactly.
and you feel that he may be a person who influence market into rethinking. Now, we have seen, haven't we, already on the HS2 campaign, use of eviction, for example, whereby contractors did withdraw from the cherry picking contractors. They actually withdrew from HS2 when we disclosed to them what HS2 were about. They didn't want to be associated anymore with HS2. So potentially, you've done an amazing thing here today, because the messages here today is if Marsh JLT can withdraw their insurance from HS2 and from the HS2 contractors, then this is going to literally pull the rug from underneath the feet of HS2. So please don't diminish that conversation that you had, because Mike, you potentially done an amazing thing here this morning. And so as a parent myself, I thank you. I have children myself, that's one reason why I'm here today. Another reason that people are here today is because they are really distressed by the wildlife crime that we know on a daily basis that HS2 is perpetrating. And other people we know are here today because they are horrified by the social injustice that HS2 perpetrates, insofar as the compulsory possession of 888 residential premise dwellings. So on average, that's probably about 4,000 people are having their homes possessed compulsorily by HS2. Over 9 business premises are being compulsorily purchased by HS2. And those business places, when HS2 go in to negotiate with them, people are prevented from recording those meetings with HS2. And we're also talking about landowners that are having, their farms, their land possessed by HS2, land that has been in their families for generations and would potentially be bequeathed to those families. So what was it that particularly struck you about HS2, really drove you to come here today and to take part in this action and fulfill the role that you had this morning?
So the issue I have with HS2 is that they should have found another route that didn't harm any wildlife or have a big impact on ancient woodlands, and of course, like the people who sadly lost their homes. That shouldn't have happened. But as I say, coming back to the fact that all that woodland has been destroyed, I think they could have easily used existing track and repurposed it or replaced it. Basically, it seems to me, it kind of feels like this government has sort of thrown 28 pounds to woodlanders, construction companies, to build big roads. They seem to be HS2 just throwing hundreds of billions of pounds at HS2. Of course, I'm all for railways. That is the solution. We need more railways. But it's pointless having a new railway if we're just going to mow down like acres and acres and acres and acres of woodland. I mean, it just seems ridiculous.
You're absolutely right. It is asinine, isn't it? I just, if ever there was a situation where the word stupid could be appropriately applied, HS2 for me is it. Yeah. And if that word stupid was never used again in the whole of the English language, it will have fulfilled its purpose, because whichever way you slice it, HS2 is utterly stupid. And is, of course, because any justification that there has been put forward for HS2 as retrospective justification, this is a vanity project. It's a term that's been bandied around often, but it is nothing more than a vanity project. Lord Adonis, he wanted the fastest railway in the world that was his reason, and because of that, that's why it's going on this straight route through these 108 ancient woodland, 33 sites of special scientific interest, 693 wildlife protection sites, why it's displacing people from their homes and their property. It is purely a vanity project. So yeah, thank you so much for everything that you did this morning. It's absolutely tremendous. Thank you to your cohorts as well, who placed the banner at the front there. And yeah, yeah, I think, well, we're all crew, aren't we? So this has been a massive undertaking today. We've got those two brave rebels behind you who are still clinging to outside that building. You know, they're skilled climbers. It's not the first time they've done this. And we've just given them a wave, and whoa, there they go, giving them a wave. So we're all in support of these brave climbers. So that is around and about it for today.
Hello everyone. So if you are just joining us and you're a bit confused as to why we're here, what we've been doing, who are you just listening to talk? Well, we are outside of Marsh Insurance's building. And Marsh Insurance is a huge, huge problem for HS2 because HS2, well, actually it really helps HS2, it supports HS2, it allows it to keep going. It is HS2's insurer. So if you can do something, anything at all, put pressure on them, we really can do this together. Today we're trying to do that by putting banners outside their building, by putting police here saying, look, we know you're the insurer. We know that you have a big part to play in allowing this destruction to happen. You definitely need to take responsibility for this. And if you can change, then please, please do. If you ditch HS2, maybe we all can. And that's what we all really want to do. Now, we've heard from a few rebels here today. We even heard from Larch, who's not able to enter London, who's one of the campaigners of HS2, who has been arrested many times. We've seen him a lot. We've got these two campaigners up here standing there bravely, scaling the side of the building. We've talked to Rowley, who was one of the people underneath in the tunnels underneath Euston, campaigning against HS2. This campaign has gone on for a very, very long time, since the inception of HS2 10 years ago. There is no case for HS2, is what everybody here is saying, from north to south. This does not make sense. We've talked a lot about the human costs. I'm going to talk a little bit more about some of those things, just to summarise before we move on and wrap up today. As I mentioned, we are going to be wrapping up, but please remember that these people will still be here. So if you can, bring your body and put it here and show your support. It will be very, very welcome. If you can't put it here, then please campaign online. Let the HS2 know that this is not acceptable. This is not what we want. The 12th of September is a deadline where people in power are going to be talking about the future of this project. So if you can get your voice known between here and now in protest of HS2, please, please do it. This project is costing over £200 billion. That costs about $7,700 to each individual taxpayer in a year. That's outrageous. We've heard about that today a lot. But did we know much more than the 108 ancient woodlands that it's impacting, as well as the human costs? Yes, we do. We know lots and lots of things about that side of things. 108 ancient woodlands are going to be impacted, 33 sites of legally protected sites of special scientific interest, 693 classified local wildlife sites, 5 wildlife refuges of international importance, 18 wildlife trust nature reserves, 26 large landscape-scale conservation efforts, as well as damage to other wildlife-rich habitats, including wetlands, veteran trees, wildflower meadows, and historic wood pasture. Urban green spaces are being eradicated too. This problem is enormous and spans across so many parts of the UK. We need to put a stop to this. We need to stop the harm, and we can do this if we do this together. That was just a mention of the environmental costs. The human damage is enormous as well. You've heard about this today already. If you're just tuning in now, please have a listen back to the rest of the recording. You'll be able to speak to a few of those people who have been on the front line. This is not good enough. We can do better. The British countryside is incredible. The UK is beautiful. This is not what we want to be doing. If you feel the same, please add your comments to this video. Please share with at least 5 people outside of your normal environmental circles. We want to get the conversation going. And if you disagree what we're doing today, please be skeptical. Do your own research, and let's get the conversation going. And more importantly, let's get action to stop HS2. That's the high-speed railway. Now I'm going to leave you with these rebels here, and we're going to move on to another protest that's happening a bit later on today. You're listening to Extinction Rebellion. My name's Alice. Today, also on the live stream, we've had many faces that are. There are many people involved in this, and it would be great if you could do too. Thanks very much.
Look at that. This is just one morning of work for HS2 that yesterday was being discussed in Parliament, the future of which hangs in the balance. It may not even go ahead, and yet the work continues, destroying hedgerows, chopping down old trees and ruining this countryside. And for what? I could turn around tomorrow and go, no, we're not going to do this anymore. That tree's gone. That's it. Game over for this bit of countryside. And there's a desperation amongst the contractors. There's this scrabble to grab the money to make sure they can do what they can, just in case the plug is pulled, that their contracts don't get fulfilled. So let's plough on so we've got something billable, something we can charge for, something we can grab back out of the ugly chaos that is this project. I mean, how many more trees? Come on, for God's sake, just stop now.